Evidence that crazy stuff is happening to kids right now. It's peripheral evidence. It's crazy.
And maybe, given those facts, which I did not know at the time that I learned about this program, given those facts that have come to light, perhaps this is a way of safeguarding the children of the elite from accidentally falling afoul of a trafficker, perhaps. Like if you're accidentally kidnapped, they'll immediately know that it's some high-level Mason's kid and they can't mess with them, right? So this is an actual real program that exists and it's public. You can look it up later and you'll probably laugh about this. But
hey guys, welcome back to Edge of Wonder with our incredible mystery man, Freemason insider, Joaquin. It's just been an amazing interview.
Yeah, thanks so much for being with us.
And then you have the Scottish Rite. So the York Rite is Christian, the Shrine is Islamic. Scottish Rite is kind of non-denominational. It's one of the more popular rites. They have a lot of libraries. Again, I was in a Scottish Rite library I was talking about earlier. Their mystical tradition and work and symbolism most closely resembles, if you want to call it that, Orthodox Hermeticism, stripped of either Christian or Islamic symbols. So it's like, they use the snake touching its head that you often see on like
Theosophy,
that's their, even in some temples, the G itself is a snake.
Really?
That's merely wrapped like this.
So this is the Ouroboros kind of thing.
It's that same snake from Hinduism and Egypt, and they all use this snake, right? And the ancient Greeks too, with their staff of Hermes, right? So they use that snake, and sometimes the snake is literally, the G is rendered as a snake, with the head kind of going back under the tail. They have all kinds of symbolism everywhere in lodges and libraries and rooms. It's literally pick your type of mystical symbol, it's all there. It's all present. For instance, above the altar in many lodges, at least in the one that I was in, is a 5-pointed star. Okay, and in part of the ritual, you do circle around the altar like this. So again, there's a ton of stuff in Masonry that is, if you're a mainstream Orthodox religious person or Christian, there's been a lot of people who said, Masonry is completely compatible with Christianity. In some ways, it is. Strictly speaking, Blue Lodge Masonry, in my understanding, is compatible with Orthodox religious belief. But mind yourself, because this stuff is there. It's present and in full view in the Masonic Lodge. So you're conducting ceremonies in candlelight and speaking Low Dutch. I mean, it's a strange organization. It's a very old organization. I'm happy to have met the people I've met through it. I won't, renounce it totally or say that it's, something that utterly is, detestable, at least on the level of...
Yeah, what level you were at.
Right, and as a social club, it really can't be beat. I mean, the people you meet, they're if you want a good letter of recommendation, boy, you can get one. And some of the brothers have told me if I ever need one for any job, that I've got it from them.
What would happen to you if they found out you were on a show like this, revealing what you knew at your...
Technically, I haven't revealed the so-called secrets.
So there are things that that you haven't revealed in this interview?
Yes.
And those are the things you were sworn to not talk about?
Yes. Are
they creepy? I'm not asking you to tell us what they are.
They are basically just the signs, symbols, and words used in the ritual itself, And the reason you can't reveal them is because other people could pass themselves off as Masons and infiltrate Masonry. So they're actually nothing that a person needs to concern themselves with unless they plan on sneaking into a Masonic lodge and pretending to be a Mason. Those are the so-called secrets of Masonry that you take an oath not to reveal. This other stuff that I've talked about technically is able to be talked about.
So let me ask you another question. So what I've understood from our research is that the reason why those things are so important that you just discussed, like the secrets, is that they're constantly testing you to see if you can keep more and more secrets as you're increasing your degrees within the Masonry.
Correct.
And then revealing more and more things. And this is actually how, according to the historical accounts of the original Illuminati and the French Freemasonry, actually came about as well, is the revealing of the mysteries, and then they're testing to see what you can kind of, hold in, and then they reveal at a certain point all of these secrets, like for you and your bloodline, and you would be able to, actually get most of this stuff revealed to you if you chose to go that path. And there may be some darker things that they show and reveal as well, and different things that you might go through at those levels.
And it seems like each level has their own set of secret hand signs.
They do, and you don't know them when you're an entered apprentice. What you learn as a fellow craft, which is then again different from what you learn as a master Mason. It is, if you want, or it was historically used as a outer court, as it were, to these kinds of more secretive societies. So, like the gymnasium in ancient Greek, where the senators and the philosophers would look for people who showed aptitude and invite them to know the higher things, right? This has been going on for thousands of years, actually, in different ways in society. So this is just the remnant of that. Whether the inner work at this point in time still amounts to much is anybody's guess, but it's the same format, you could say, as those old things. And I'll give you another example how seriously they take this, and I'll give you a little fun little hint, is that because this is public in a movie, so Nick Cage basically tells you what will happen to you if you reveal it, and they are pretty serious about this. For instance, we had a brother who was using one of the signs casually, as it were, or too casually, among non-master Masons, perhaps new Masons or whatever. Maybe he was just showing off. Some members of the lodge found out about it, and I wasn't present and don't know the details, but apparently they sent 9 members to his house to tell him that this was not a good idea.
Like saying basically if you continued you were going to lose your life, or?
You could say that.
Yeah, because the oaths are basically like, if you do reveal the secrets, you're forfeiting your life.
Essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And they do actually take that seriously then.
Yeah. I've never seen it.
I understand, but I'm assuming if they're taking it seriously and they're saying those things, that actually there would be some follow through. Can we assume that?
We can probably assume that.
What about like all of the rap artists and the Hollywood stars that are doing the pyramid hand sign and things like that?
Pointless, probably fake, probably disinformation. None of those are actual. They're actual in the sense of it looks like the pyramid on the back of the dollar bill, but those aren't the actual signs.
Well, I was going to say, because Ben and I have been researching this stuff and been watching all of these, it's like the directors of these music videos are very in tune with what's going on in, for instance, your lodges. And then they're specifically orchestrating these music videos to pass certain things out in society, some of which could, of course, be a little bit of of a decoy, but at the same time, why do that? Why have these music videos with these black and white tiles and the very specific things that you're talking about are even in these Masonic lodges if they don't want this to be in people's consciousness and out there?
There are definitely people putting occult symbols out into there, but those are not the standard communication symbols of Blue Lodge Masonry. But they are definitely occult symbols of a kind. Now, some of them are very rough, you could say. They're rough approximations of an occult symbol, and whether the person has just incidentally absorbed them and decided to use them, or really knows their meaning is anybody's guess in some of this stuff, I think. For a person spiritually, sometimes where you are in terms of your own character determines the kinds of things you like and are apt to mimic or use. And so I think some people are using these symbols without, almost unconsciously so. Some may be doing it consciously so if they practice theosophy or practice some occult thing. But I think some of this stuff is kind of just in the water now because it has been put out there, presumably by secret societies, some of which may be tied to Masonry or not, that have kind of intentionally pushed those symbols out there to serve an agenda. The cover of Rolling Stone and everyone's covering their eye, and those are pretty close to the symbols that are used in Masonry without being absolutely on the nose, you might say.
There's a secret meeting place.
Yes, let's go inside.
Sounds good.
Whoop.
It's like what was in National Treasure, where he alluded to the actual thing without actually saying it. And of course, a person in the know would recognize that.
I see.
And there may be some, again, with numbers and symbols, there are the possibility of higher energies of some kind behind those symbols. So who knows what effect those things have in broad use to see them. I don't know what the effect is. Again, I've never been trained in the occult arts. I certainly don't practice them. The symbols do, on the surface, seem to be similar.
Interesting. So like when like, I think it was Prince Henry that had his like
The hand in the thing.
and it was like the devil horn thing that he was doing.
Yeah, they do that.
Again, some of this vaguely Masonic, vaguely occult, but what they actually mean by it is people use the cross, right? They put the cross on the Rose-Croix in Rosicrucianism, and Jesus is also depicted on the cross in Catholicism. Is it the same meaning?
I see.
Maybe, kind of, but a lot of people use the cross in history. You have those mystery religions going back, and they use a T shape. People just making a T with their body with no cross, but they're making a T with their body like Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man, So again, some of these symbols are just kind of fundamental, maybe to the universe, maybe they have some other purpose. Maybe you can pervert them for some purpose, just like you can use a swastika if you're a Nazi, but that's not the original meaning of a swastika, right? So you can pervert certain symbols. They may have some inherent power, but are those the original symbols? Are those really what you think they are? Are you even able to use them correctly or effectively? Esoteric symbols, they've been around forever. I think a lot of the meaning, the actual meaning, has been lost, totally obliterated or changed so many times as to be, it's like a really worn out shirt, Maybe it used to be blue, now it's like faded gray, like who knows what they mean anymore.
So I mean, like with Jay-Z keeps coming to mind because he's very into Aleister Crowley, obviously, with the slogans he has and everything else. Do you think that they're actually trying to do something with these symbols?
For sure, you can try to use these things. I mean, Aleister Crowley, in his book, which I did read a tiny bit of and immediately put it down because I knew it was basically evil, but he talks about, in the opening page, he talks about essentially channeling and being possessed by something. he was definitely trying to do it, because it's described by his biographer, whoever actually wrote the book, that he had been trying to summon this thing for like many hours, and even like chained himself up in order to do so. So he really wanted this thing. He wanted it more than anything. And I think a person's intent has quite a lot to do with it. You know, if you're taking a Ouija board or taking these symbols or doing something and you want to make a bunch of money, well, maybe you'll get that money. And maybe what gave it to you is not going to be right. But does it matter if you use this symbol or that? You know, I think a person's intent has a lot to do with it.
Very
That's a
interesting.
really good point, because I mean, if you're doing a similar, like, because actually, I mean, it's like Buddhism, they have hand signs too. Like you know Jesus, like, you know, the whole thing.
Right.
There's that famous painting of Jesus holding up the two fingers, and people are saying like, oh, well, and then there's Baphomet, you know, kind of mocking
Right.
that whole thing, you know. So I think you hit a really important point, that it's the intention behind what this is.
I'll give you an example. Like, a bunch of symbols on the tarot cards are similar to symbols used in communist revolutionary marches. They're similar to symbols used in even in Black Lives Matter protests, in terms of the layout of the figures and the fist. They're similar to certain Christian drawings or paintings or certain things in the Vatican. Say what you will about the Vatican, but are they all the same meaning? Yeah, I think there is this element of parroting. I think there is this element of stealing other people's symbols outright and trying to pervert them for some other purpose. Christians celebrate Christmas, we all know, but they celebrate it by burning, by hanging a holly wreath, having a fireplace with a Yule log, and having Yuletide carols, and a tree that's cut down that all comes from Odin worship, right? People have been confused for some time, is what I'm thinking. They're just confused. People just be using stuff, like finding it on the street. Oh, I'm going to use that. That's cool,
Yeah.
Pick it up and put a tattoo. Who knows what it means, People do all kinds of dumb things, honestly.
Okay, wait.
Interesting.
We're kind of wrapping it up soon, but I have a couple of other questions. Like,
Sure.
Is the queen a reptilian?
that wasn't my question. So, King Solomon.
Yes, very important in Masonry.
Yeah, very important in Masonry. They seem to think that he was the greatest magician of all time. Basically, if you've read the Bible cover to cover, if you've kind of gotten into the some of the other books, especially King Solomon's books, you know that he was given a ring by Archangel Michael, and he was able to control demons. A lot of symbolism, numerology within his account of what happened during that time, and they're using direct symbolism in Masonic lodges that are connected to King Solomon. And so I was just kind of curious, and also there's this whole connection to the Holy Grail and the different organizations like the Priory of Sion that have kind of throughout history been connected to Masons, and that have been connected to all kinds of different stuff. And I was kind of just curious to get your take on those things. Like,
Okay, so some of the books say, and again, the books are not in total agreement. Some of these books are in the Masonic Library, some are publicly available. They say that the Templars guarded things. So the layperson thinks the Templars guarded a bunch of money, gold, right? Some people in more esoteric circles say that the real treasure that the Masons, the Templar Masons or the Templars guarded, was the actual esoteric teachings or cultivation teachings of Jesus. So the inner path was guarded. That was the real Holy Grail, which gives eternal life, is the actual cultivation method by which to achieve it. So that was the real secret. But a profane person who was after money would constantly go around hunting for gold. But that was just a ruse, right? In some of the books, it was just a ruse to throw people off of the scent of finding actual cultivation, right? So some people say, including Dan Brown famously, that they guard the descendants, if you want to follow this thread, which isn't orthodox, that Jesus was married to Mary Magdalene and had children. And this is in Masonic symbolism and texts and different things. You've heard the phrase blue blood, right? Blue blood. And we also have blue lodge masonry. So what does that mean? People say blue blood, they usually mean old money or these old wealthy families, so-called blue blood. Blue blood, technically, according to Templar lore, is blood relation to Jesus.
Whoa.
That's what blue blood is.
Why is it called blue blood?
Unknown.
Okay.
That's the word they use for it. So blue blood, it means you have some blood relation to Jesus. The other thing that the Templars were said to guard was who the actual descendants who should rule, if you follow King James with his, law of free monarchs. He talks about he wrote that book, which talks about the divine right of kings. It was already a concept at the time. It means you have God-given power to rule. Again, back then, bloodline extremely important to whether or not you could rule, obviously, right? And those people, some of them did claim descent from Jesus or from the apostles or from other great figures, Alexander the Great or others in history. It was popular to claim all kinds of stuff. So another thing that the Templars were said to have guarded is the true lineage of who is actually descendant of Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene or not. They guard the true descendants. Now, in my mind, it's entirely possible that the Templars were later hijacked by some other force and different names put into those places, so that the actual kings were pushed aside and other rulers put into their place, which is similar to what's asserted with the whole Khazarian Jew thing, where you have 12 ruling families, but they replace them.
Oh my gosh, so like the 13 bloodlines, there could be a whole different bloodline name.
Well, and we've seen that.
The 13 bloodlines are supposed to be those same descendants. That's what they're essentially claiming implicitly, is they're claiming descent and right to rule based on connection to Jesus or other biblical figures or important historical figures. And because of their blood, they have that right, and it's theirs given by God. Now, if they're to replace that or change that, one can imagine that the actual rulership of the world, would be very different, right? If one follows that theory and believes there should be monarchy and things like this. One can imagine that fighting over this or trying to control it would be a kind of goal that people might have, like the people who tried to overthrow King James and tried to overthrow a bunch of other stuff. And, in history, one of the funny things that I always get with people who kind of don't believe that there are any modern conspiracies afoot is I always think, for hundreds of years, thousands of years, people have been trying to overthrow the English monarchy. Why would no one preposterously be trying to overthrow the American government? It just seems like you've had these years and years of people plotting, and then all of a sudden, it's democracy, so I guess we don't have to plot anymore. We just vote, and it's good. It's a kind of a slip of mind, to think that there would be no one trying to seize power, right? Isn't that ridiculous?
Yeah,
it
There would
is.
be no one trying to seize power. I have not been active in Masonry in the time of Trump, so I don't know what some of my lodge brothers feel about. I know a lot of the ones that I personally knew heavily Republican in personal life. For whatever reason, they wanted to save their money and not take it with the tax. That was their main thing. But again, some of them not really that concerned about politics. In fact, donating to both parties was extremely common. They just donate all around. They donate to whoever needs it, kind of. They'll donate here, there, because they just want a seat at the table. I think so many people, they're just not thinking like an actual ruler. You know, you don't have to be so trivial with distinction of Democrat, Republican. In the lodge, we're all brothers.
I see. I see.
Get it? Democrat, Republican, who cares? In the lodge, we're all brothers. Get it?
But wait a minute. Okay, wait.
That's so
So
fascinating.
King Solomon and his ring, and then Masonic rings. Any kind of, is there anything connection there, or what do you think about that subject?
The rings, I don't know much about. King Solomon, definitely a very important figurehead kind of figure in Masonry. A lot of things that he did in his temple are what the Masonic Lodge is based on in terms of layout. So, for instance, he built his temple using stones, which were cut in the quarry before being brought there. No actual tools were heard to sound on the grounds where his temple was built. So all the pieces were cut and perfect beforehand, and he just sort of fitted them together on the site. So this could be a metaphor for all kinds of things. Masons, to say the least, are big on long-term planning. So if you get into stuff like Springmeyer's book on monarch, mind control and this kind of technique, they prepare people their whole life for the role that they will step into. And Masonry, although I haven't seen this direct connection, but I can certainly see how the thinking is similar, where you're preparing something in advance, well in advance, before bringing it to the temple grounds. It's even stated in the ritual, this kind of very long-term thinking. I mean, really long-term thinking. You're not on about day-to-day politics. You're just not on about it. What you want is a foundation. Even the word foundation, like charity, may come from Masonry because it's a foundation. Get it? A foundation for the master mason to lay his ground drafts.
Oh, that's weird. I never thought of that before.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
that's nuts.
So you see where I'm going?
Yeah.
I'll tell you this, it's a different kind of thinking that is prevalent in Masonry. It's not the trivial thinking of most people. Certainly not under the effect of the internet and this BS, and you're just getting upset about every little thing and such and so on, scandal and whatever. Use the other person then, like we're still gonna Mason. Mason's gonna Mason, never mind who, just get it done. Some of these people, I think, they kind of botched it up in a way. They kind of were too egregious with their personal behavior, and it botched up the work.
Yeah.
That's so fascinating. Oh my gosh. I mean, that just makes me think about how many words in our language that we use every day that have this Masonic
Influence.
We did this whole thing on occult studies with the English words, like S, for example, like how S is in everything, and it sounds like we're kind of hissing when we even speak. Very snake-like reptilian aspect to it. But, this aspect I didn't even think about.
When they make a decision with money, they talk about it as being in accordance with the Masonic plan. So there's definitely a logic here. There's a rhythm to how they give their money. That plan was not decided by me, to say the least, but it's in use. It's talked about tangentially, and interestingly, it's not really questioned. Again, they use the word hierarchy. That's what they use, and it is. Masonry, if anything, is a fixed hierarchy. It's fixed in stone. Get it?
Oh. And with that, we can end this interview.
No, but I mean, here's another interesting one. Speaking of stones, it's said in Masonry that the foundation of a building is often laid in the northeast corner. New York, northeast. Chongqing, northeast.
So the cornerstone of the United States is New York City, is what you're saying.
Uh-huh.
And the cornerstone of China is Changchun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like we probably could go for another couple hours.
I
You
feel
could keep
that's-
dropping stuff.
I know.
But
I
maybe
feel
for
the
another
same
time.
way. I'm like, oh my gosh! Like it's just everything you're saying. I'm just like, oh my gosh.
It's like it's like the more questions we ask, the more just information starts coming out.
I
It's
know.
very interesting.
So maybe we can continue this on later.
Get yourself out to a Masonic lodge and find some more crazy books.
Let us know what you're reading.
And yeah, you know, for next time you can kind of come in with some extra information. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
There's a crazy story. A friend of mine actually, he said that his sister, she kind of has like weird abilities. She just walked into this like really old library in Michigan and just walked into this restricted section, picked up a book, started reading it. He was telling me she has these like weird abilities. She can just do certain things. Out of nowhere, someone approached her and said to her, "You shouldn't be here. They're watching you." She just closed the book and thought, okay, maybe I shouldn't be here after all, and put the book away and started walking back. And she said there was all these crazy, or he was telling me that there was, what she saw was all these crazy occult books. But she said the person who approached her was very pale, and she said this person was not human. So I mean, that's why when you were kind of saying that, it kind of reminded me of the story. So
That's a freaky story.
it's
Ben.
a very freaky
I
story. This is a
mean-
very close friend of mine, and I had no idea he even had these stories. He's like, yeah, I got a lot of stories. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's crazy.
You know, I think there are certain people who are, for whatever reason, in tune with these energies or can sense them or have some kind of ability, and they may encounter something like this. I guess. It's said that Taoists seal their caves with supernormal abilities. Maybe libraries have rooms that are sealed with supernormal abilities. I don't know. Some people talk about walking into another dimension.
Well, Joaquin, is there any last words that you want to say before we wrap this interview up?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say to people, like, you know, just when you go about your day-to-day, you know, just use compassion, you know, or as Martin Luther King might say, brotherly love, right? This is really probably what originally this stuff was supposed to be about, you know, before it got maybe infected is the right word with some of this other stuff. Don't be too quick to judge people, you know. I think a big mistake that people make now, and when watching the news or anything, is that the other side is totally evil or something. You know, when many people are just confused. You know, they may be just as confused as you are. You know, and there definitely are people that are evil in this world, but I think it's a very, very small number compared to the ones that are kind of in the middle, that are neither totally evil nor totally good. And those people still have a chance.
Yeah, it's been awesome to have you. And I guess we'll have Joaquin back on sometime.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right, I'm Joaquin, this is Edge of Wonder, and I'll see you out on the edge.
Of Frosted Flakes.